Well, welcome everyone, members and guests to the Royal United Services Institute for Defence and Security Studies, New South Wales, September lunchtime lecture, which is on the development and use of unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs as they are commonly called. And a very warm welcome to our Vice Patron, Air Vice Marshal Glen, AM, CSC, DSM, Air Commander Australia, who will be introduced by our Vice President and Events Coordinator, Ron Lyons.
Thanks, Kim, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 8th in our lecture series for 2024. As Kim has said, today's lecture is the development and use of unmanned aerial vehicles, and it will be presented by Air Vice Marshal Glen Braz, AM, CSC, DSM, Air Commander Australia, who is, as Kim said, one of our Vice Patrons. Since joining the Royal Australian Air Force in 1987, he has been a pilot, a commander at flight, squadron and group levels, including commander of the Australian Air Task Group Middle East region in 2015. He's also held a number of senior appointments, which include Deputy Director of the Super Hornet Transition Team, Director of the Growler Airborne Electronic Attack Capability Transition Team, glad I got that out, Commander of the Air Force Training Group, Director General of Military Strategic Commitments and Deputy Chief of Air Force. In July 2023, he was appointed Air Command Australia with the responsibility for the preparation of Australia's air combat forces. Would you please welcome Air Vice Marshal Braz to the podium.
Very important. Thank you for the very warm invitation. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'd like to acknowledge the Royal United Services Institute for the wonderful work you do and for convening events such as this where I have the opportunity to talk to such an esteemed audience. And of course I'd acknowledge Mr President, Mr Kim Turner, for your ongoing support. It's wonderful to be part of this. I thank and acknowledge the members here assembled and those interested from around the community for your presence today and this opportunity. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is truly a pleasure to be here. I would first like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands upon which we meet, and I pay my respects to their elders who form an important part of our community leadership moving forward together. In 2023, Air Services Australia estimate there were 1.5 million flights of drones inside Australian airspace, with the growth projected as 20% compounding per year to reach a point of 60 million flights by 2043. They think we're on track to achieve that record, and it gives us a sense of the scale and enormity of the issues and challenges related to what I will call drones for the purposes of this lecture. Today I will talk about the broad topic, and I think that introductory statement gives us a sense of what we're dealing with here. I will talk about that growth, what it means for security, what it means for operations, the risks and opportunities that it presents us as a defence force, and then I'll talk briefly also about what we are doing about it and how the Royal Australian Air Force, your Air Force, is responding. What we have seen is exponential growth of UAVs across the force and across the community. And what that represents is effectively a democratisation of air power in the hands of everyday citizens, driven by commercial technology and the opportunities that they present for peaceful and reasonable use across the community. Drones today provide a range of civil services, including, but and not limited to, goods delivery. A developing venture into passenger services, moving people by drones, is a thing that is starting to take shape. We see it in surf lifesaving and shark patrols, agriculture, mining, emergency services, real estate. You can't buy a house without a picture of a drone or a drone fly-through occurring. sport, of course, in all of its forms, media writ large, and the list goes on and on. It's largely endless. The creativity of people and our ability to adapt drone technology for interesting uses is exploding around us. They are also increasing in capacity, and very recently China demonstrated a drone that could carry 3.2 tonnes, fly up to 24,000 feet and transit 2,200 kilometres. That is a significant capability and one that presents opportunity and risk, but it's symbolic of the rate and pace of change and the scale at which this technology is growing. So this democratisation of aviation technology is real and it is upon us today. Anyone can operate these systems almost anywhere. They are increasingly user-friendly. The skill levels required to operate them are limited and quickly attainable through trial and error or online systems, and they link in a ubiquitous way with the technology we have with us already, such as mobile phones, cameras, etc. But the digital ecosystem is alive and well and includes drones more and more. They operate with payloads that would be considered intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance systems of just a few years ago. There's a range of sensors that have incredible fidelity and precision in terms of their performance. They can operate day and night. They can sense and avoid obstacles, and they can achieve a great deal of surveillance and awareness of the environment around them. Many of you would have witnessed things such as drone shows at an Australia Day event over the harbour. I've certainly seen them in Canberra over Lake Burley Griffin, and they give you a sense of this. When you see 1,000 drones operating in a show to generate 3D effects in real time, you understand the potential of the technologies that we're looking at. So they give us a glimpse into the art of the possible when we talk about swarming and autonomous behaviours, carefully programmed and choreographed. And when you combine that sort of technology with the idea of something that can carry 3 tonnes of payload, 2,500 kilometres, then we clearly have something to look and think about very deeply. They have incredibly broad application. And as you've seen in the media and has come into sharp focus through the war in Ukraine, drones are being used in many, many ways, including drones against drones, drones against vehicles, armoured or otherwise, drones against people, individually following and attacking people. And clearly they carry out a range of ISR and EW, electronic warfare, effects around the battlefield. There are many, many of them, and they are expensive to counter. So the technology that we have at the moment to counter drones includes things such as small arms, which are cheap but largely ineffective. We have missile systems which are somewhat effective but incredibly expensive. So the asymmetry that drones present is a challenge that both we have to face, but an opportunity we have to leverage. Drones are no longer niche, they are now widespread, and the democratisation continues. And when we talk about drones, we have to be very careful because there's a range of systems that we are actually referring to here, and they range from something tiny, the size of a small bird that can be launched from the palm of someone's hand, and we have those in service in the ADF today for obvious and very useful reasons, to something the size of a 737 airliner. And arguably, they all fall within the broad spectrum of what we would call a drone. The Royal Australian Air Force has the MQ-4C Triton long-range, high-endurance UAV. It's remotely piloted, but arguably you could consider it a drone. It can fly for 20 or more hours at heights above 50,000 feet. It's everywhere, and it's a very broad spectrum. So we have to ask ourselves what these capabilities, systems and technologies mean for safety of our aviation systems, the ones that we rely on so helpfully from across our daily lives, And all of us use air transport routinely. So we need to consider the safety aspects, but importantly, we need to consider the security aspects. We need to consider the capability aspects. And these, as I've said already, present both a challenge and an opportunity. So let's talk about the challenge and what that means and how we're looking at it from a Defence Force perspective. And even though I'm the Air Commander, I am truly part of an integrated force, and I speak routinely, commonly, often, with my counterparts across all of the domains across the ADF, including space and cyber. Nothing can be parked in one domain anymore. But the new technology we are seeing through drones and their capabilities that they offer is absolutely disrupting the status quo of how we consider security, capability and warfare. From a purely civil perspective, Air Services Australia and the Civil Aviation Safety Authority have responsibility for the introduction of these technologies into the Australian ecosystems. Now that's appropriate, but it creates some interesting challenges that I'll talk about in a brief moment. I would also highlight that when we talk about drones moving people around the environment, we suddenly get into a very different scenario from what we're used to, where you get on an aircraft at an airport, largely through security systems, your bags are x-rayed, you're security screened, and there's a robust process to do all of the appropriate security measures, as we should expect around civil aviation. But in the drone era, those things may not exist anymore or be a very different challenge for us to face. So the aircrew and operator training, accreditation and vetting, which is currently tightly controlled, is something that will need to evolve to adapt to and accommodate the technologies that we're seeing emerge around drones. The passenger screening that we see is expensive and onerous, and it goes against what we would increasingly see as a community expectation of increasing convenience around all forms of travel, be it the metro tunnel or how you want your pizza delivered. People seek convenience in their lives, and if drones can take you quickly from A to B for a reasonable cost, people will expect that to occur seamlessly. But the predicted scale of growth will continue to challenge legislators, regulators and other authorities that are stakeholders. And the overlapping authorities within Australia create seams between state, federal and defence authorities. And I'll give you some examples. The AFP is responsible for aviation security in Australia, and you see AFP officers often at airports. Some of them are visible, often armed, but they have significant and appropriate authorities across the system. The state and territory authorities have local resources, but how does the priority of unsafe or potentially illegal drone operations compare with the other challenges that they face? And the example I'll give you is, if I have a drone operating near a defence establishment, I need to call the local police force because my authorities are very limited about what I can do to address that or to apprehend the system or the people involved in operating the system. The legalities of that operation are murky at best, and it's a challenge that we face where we find ourselves operating in an environment of acceptable legal risk from a Defence Force perspective, to do the things that you and I would expect quite reasonable through that endlessly common sense approach of what passes the pub test. But if I call the local police, they might be very busy dealing with some other issue that is of higher importance to them, and rightfully so, they may declassify the priority of our response in their own system. My limited enforcement powers very quickly evaporate when I move away from the bases and places that we operate. And this is not just a challenge for air bases where we have aviation occurring, but it's a challenge for defence sites writ large. We have archaic language and arcane and dated legal concepts in our legislative frameworks that exist right now. So, for example, is overflight with a drone of a defence establishment trespassing on Commonwealth land in accordance with the Crimes Act of 1914. Equally, and somewhat more impressively, do cameras on board these drone systems constitute sketching, etc., of fortifications, quote, as an offence under the Defence Act of 1903. This is the legislation I am dealing with as an air commander in today's environment. Clearly, any work to update and refresh and contemporise our legal frameworks would be much appreciated, and there is work underway in this field. Equally, attribution of activity related to drones in and around our places is difficult to achieve, and it's hard for me to know if I see a drone operating in and around a defence establishment whose it is. Sometimes it's mine, and that's good. But they are small and fast, and they can launch and recover into different locations, and they can be largely autonomous or pre-programmed, and they can go to places where they can be very fleetingly available or vulnerable and then disappear again quickly. So it's a tricky challenge, and the problem exists now. In the first quarter of this year, there were over 5,000 drones detected in the vicinity of defence aerodromes. 5,000 in a quarter. They're the ones we can detect and have detected. Some of them are more difficult, but many of them are able to be detected by our systems. In March alone, near the Sydney airport, just down the road from us where we are today, there were 50 drone detections per day in the vicinity of the airport. Now, many of those are innocent or slightly buffoonerous behaviour, perhaps, where people with some degree of ignorance about their obligations and legal frameworks operate drones as they feel free to, in accordance with their own desire or flexibility on the day. It may have been a real estate agent, it may have been a skateboarder, it may have been a wakeboarder, or it could have been someone trying to learn something or disrupt a system with malicious intent. In December 2018, at Gatwick Airport in the UK, uncontrolled drone activity shut down the airport for hours, disrupting thousands or hundreds of flights and disrupting the travel plans of over 140,000 passengers in just a few hours. So the impact and the challenge that drones in all of their forms, noting the scale and complexity and breadth of the technology, is a challenge for here and now. So in a military sense, this disruption is a challenge for force protection. The conflict in Ukraine, for all of its complexity and sadness and horror, provides a window in how the pace of innovation challenges that force protection mindset. We see the Ukrainians very, very cleverly adapting technology into drones for a range of uses, including targeting, one-way attack munitions, loitering munitions that literally loiter in the battle space, waiting for either final orders or automatic detection using artificial intelligence algorithms to attack a target that they have pre-programmed to find and prosecute. In the Black Sea, arguably, the uncrewed systems that the Ukrainians have deployed has allowed them to regain sea control without having a navy. Now, that's a fascinating topic for discussion, and I'm not a maritime effects expert, but I'm sure it will generate some discussion around the room. But we have probably all seen some of the footage and the images of remotely controlled or semi-autonomous devices chasing and targeting Russian warships in the Black Sea, which has resulted in a very different risk calculus for the Russian Navy after several key warships were sunk through that lesson. In Australia, we've applied drone challenges, lessons and opportunities, including counter-drone technologies, to some of our key exercises. And one of the things that came to mind very quickly through an exercise called Austral Shield that we conducted with the 2nd Division of the Australian Army was that the drone technology is evolving rapidly. So we need to evolve rapidly with it, both in the ways that we harness and leverage the technology, but also in the ways that we counter the technology, and that we need to think differently about how we approach capability decisions when it comes to the use of and the countering of drones. But we did exercise a range of response options to counter the drone threat against our people and our bases and our capabilities. And these involve a range of radio frequency interference, directed energy through things such as lasers and other activities which are challenging, because if you shoot a laser high powered enough to down a drone and you shoot that above the horizon, then suddenly objects in space become a factor that you need to consider, which is not a place we expected to be. You can hard kill them, which is an appealing concept for those of us who are traditional force applicators, which is to blow them up with something. And as tempting as that may be, my legal framework for doing those sorts of things is, as I said, murky at best. But really importantly, while our context is immensely different from that of which is going on in Ukraine, and the Indo-Pacific is a very different theatre to the Ukrainian or European theatres, this is an issue that we cannot ignore, and one that we are working very hard across the integrated force to address in a collective way. The opportunities, though, are many and are worth exploring in some detail. And while they're a force protection challenge, if we flip around the perspective, they also provide broad opportunity to us. The scale can be achieved with relatively low cost and industrial capacity. And as you know so well, we are a vast nation with an immense area of primary military interest, but with a small population and relatively small, albeit capable, defence forces. We can achieve mass and scale through the adoption and adaptation of this relatively low-cost, somewhat commercial technology. If you look further up the spectrum, you can see things like the MQ-28 Ghostbat, which is arguably within the category of systems that we talk about today, as a collaborative combat aircraft, and the first aircraft to be designed from a military sense and engineered and manufactured in Australia for more than 50 years. It's a remarkable machine, and one that is simply a device on the end of a big ecosystem, and while the airframe is fascinating, the system around it is arguably more compelling. Regardless, it's a great achievement and one that we will continue to explore ways to operationalise in the future. But innovation is needed to think differently and embrace these opportunities. And I'll give you an example of a technology that is now in the public space, where the Ukrainians used a network of mobile phones around their country to detect the sonic footprint, the sound signature of the drones and the cruise missiles that were one-way attack missiles that were coming towards them from Russia. They were able to pinpoint, using that technology and a network of sensors, where those drones were cruise missiles or one-way attack vehicles, so they could engage them in a cost-effective way, including with 50 calibre guns and similar machines that were much more cost-effective than a $1 million per missile surface-to-air missile system. So what we see is the rapid instigation of very, very high turnover technology cycles, and we will need to adapt with new acquisition processes to adopt and to leverage that capability, and we need to shift our mind away from bespoke and exquisite systems that we see in Air Force, as we're very used to and proud of, the advanced systems that we operate like F-35, which will operate for 30 or more years, but it's an investment that we continue to leverage, improve, maintain carefully, sustain deeply for many, many years. Drones are going to be the opposite. They will become like your mobile phone, and will probably have a shorter technology lifespan than you and I have on your phone, because we don't need a new phone every 10 minutes, but we probably need one every few years, thanks to the way they overcome and the way they degrade in time. Drones will be no different. They'll be far more consumable, and we will have very limited, if any, sustainment requirements around them. They'll be like fishing line. You go fishing with it, you use it, occasionally you lose a bit of it when a fish gets away from you, and it wears out, so you throw it away and put it in the bin, not in the river. So that mindset will be very different for Defence as an organisation that is typically and traditionally been very, very good at long-term acquisition and sustainment programs. So we will need to treat it like phone technology, where we go to a 2 to 3 year update cycle. That's both on the opportunity and the counter sides of the drone discussion. But really, if we look at drone technology and the way it's applied and the way that we are adapting to it, it really becomes an exemplar of how we need to respond as militaries in the complex environments that we face today. And I'm talking about our ability to adapt. And our ability to adapt is simply expressed through what we're seeing occurring in and around drone technology as we see it today. But the Ukrainians and others are showing us the ways that smart people who are technology savvy, who are given license and have the imperative to adapt quickly, can create opportunities that will really shift the balance of how they can operate in a contested or in a warfare setting. It is an aspect of warfare that is increasingly significant, and one that is fundamental to our mindsets as we shape and prepare the integrated force for the challenges that we see potentially emerging in our future. So, as a senior commander, our ability and willingness to enhance the force in being through retaining the licence, the moral and the systemic licence, and the skill to operate more quickly than our current peacetime acquisition and sustainment models allows, is going to be key to one of the things that I want the force to adjust to. I am setting the mindset that we need to quickly and routinely embrace change to adopt technologies and their opportunities in a way that will deliver impressive force to us. So that mindset of agility and adaptability in the force today will underwrite our ability to endure as a small nation seeking to demonstrate mass and combat power for deterrence. So the National Defence Strategy talks about some elements that are relevant to the discussion around drones. And what does it mean for your Royal Australian Air Force? As I've already said, we're on the journey already with our uncrewed aviation systems. We had the Heron in service, including in the Middle East. We're now into Triton and the MQ-4, which that operates, you'll see fly in Australia this year for the first time under our aviation safety and operating system. And as you probably are well aware, the first one of those airframes is in Tyndall and was delivered in June from the US. Subsequent airframes will arrive in coming months and years. We will then move to GhostBat with the collaborative combat aircraft concepts, where we see an ecosystem that allows us to insert airframes, effectors, capabilities, sensors, weapons into the battle space inside an ecosystem that allows us to achieve the results that we need. We are also in parallel developing smaller uncrewed aviation systems that we are adapting and exercising through a range of experimentation opportunities across the integrated force. We are also considering new concepts such as human-machine teaming, where the autonomous and pre-programmed behaviours of the systems are built into what we do. I am enhancing the ability of our aviators to be multi-skilled, and in this environment I can take risk around what is an accredited maintenance person, because the risk to the drone is limited, and I need to set the risk around the context that we face as a nation. So multi-skilled aviators who can be at one moment processing leave applications in the orderly room of a unit, and the next minute operating, loading, unloading a cargo drone or a self-defence drone on the airfield, and operate between the two seamlessly without the shackles of predetermined and overly onerous qualification mindsets. We are looking very closely at swarming and mass, and swarming behaviours continue to be something that needs to be addressed, including the integration of artificial intelligence that enables those sorts of outcomes, and I can assure you that those experiments are well progressed right now. I'm very interested in cargo drones for contested environments and to enable contested logistics. There is no doubt that we face the potential for Australia to become a contested environment where we need to operate and prevail, and the ability to move relatively small cargo payloads in and around the environment quite quickly will be important. And there are projects underway that are in the public environment that talk about the ADF's interest in acquiring a fleet of cargo drones to enable our integrated logistics into the places and bases that we want to work. Of course, if I proliferate drones in the battle space, I need to understand which ones are mine and I care about and that I want to succeed in their mission, and I also want to understand the ones that are not mine and that I care about because I want to remove them from the battle space. So that complex domain awareness will be a really interesting challenge, and one that we are folding into our requirements from an integrated air and missile defence perspective, and we shall see how that unfolds. So to conclude, as some of the data I presented today has attested, the drone technology is proliferating rapidly and the technology is expanding across the community, and we see the democratisation of this technology, which is the undercurrent which provides opportunity for both our own activities in support of our national defence, but also activities that may challenge our national defence. Ukraine and that theatre has seen the use of drones against almost everything, and most days someone in my open source intel team shares with me a piece of information that shows yet a new and creative way to employ a drone in the battlefield. One of my more interesting examples of that was a drone which literally had a stick taped to it that was flying around and shoving the stick in the blades of other drones. It was the modern day version of kids riding along, putting a broomstick in the wheel of their mate's bike, but it was remarkably effective, and they were very clever at doing this. But those sorts of things are exactly what we may need to do in extremis should our security be challenged in unusual ways. Importantly, we see rapid technology cycles coming to the forefront in this technology area. It's not all parts of it, and there will be exquisite capabilities within the drone and the UAS ecosystem, such as the Triton or the Ghostbat. Equally, there will be low-cost, high-mass, high-proliferation technologies that I need to adapt quickly and I need to counter quickly. To support that, we do want to embrace and see new acquisition processes with less oversight, more freedom, and potentially a different mindset around how we consider accountability, noting the cost equation is very different. I can, for $100,000, generate probably 100 or more advanced drones, and for that I can buy several tyres for some of my aircraft. So the calculus is quite different. We need to think about how we sustain them, and it might be a case of the multi-skilled aviator changing a propeller on a drone system in 2 minutes without a certification or a skill to do that, but simply some common sense and some basic skill sets. So we need to think about how we sustain these systems and how we leverage our ongoing support as what we would consider consumable or attritable technology. And we need to treat it like some of the technology that we are so used to using as a community in short notice and with short life cycles, such as telephones and other tech systems that are largely disposable these days. The scale of the challenge is huge, and one that we are very wide-eyed about, but we are facing head-on. Equally, the depth of the opportunity is large, and we are very much looking to leverage And we are in the process of leveraging ways to harness this technology for our benefit and for your benefit and for that of the nation. Overall, this is a time to embrace opportunities and adapt quickly in a system willing to think differently and meet new challenges. Thank you for your time.
Glen DC AUSI. I noted your comments on the MQ-28 GHOSTbat. I also noted a public statement by the Minister some time ago saying this would not be an armed system. Is that a technical decision or is it a policy decision?
That's possibly a question that relates to the use of MQ-28 as we see it now as part of an ecosystem. So it's a vehicle to generate and develop an ecosystem rather than one that is focused on what I would argue is a deliverer of kinetic effects. Noting it can be many things. It can be a sensor. It can be it might be something we want visible in the battle space for the purpose of overwhelming a potential adversary. It can be many things. I would say that the technology has multiple uses, and how we apply it overall may not be exactly how you see it unfold in MQ-28. So that isn't the only thing that's happening. So we are looking at all opportunities for that kind of technology, which MQ-28 will deliver us on the journey as we move forward, building an ecosystem that works for us and works with and amongst our allies as well. A microphone, the lady over the back here. Hello.
Hello, Julie Warren, friend of member of Rishi and potential member. I'm looking at something I don't know what it is, and I'd like to know what its equivalent of its size is, and in a normal aircraft, and what's its aerodrome look like? What sort of surface does it land on?
Okay, these are excellent questions. Thank you for asking. And I'm sorry, I couldn't actually see the screen. So, but that is an MQ-4 Triton. That is the new uncrewed aviation system that we have, or remotely piloted system that we have. That one in Tyndall, in the Northern Territory. So it's operating from one of our normal air bases, and it will commence flying operations soon. The wingspan of that aircraft is the equivalent of a Boeing 737 airliner, and it's not quite as long because it doesn't have to carry a whole bunch of people going from A to B, but it is filled with sensors and radars and communications equipment that lets it operate in and around the region for missions that will extend to over 20 hours in duration.
Has it got any wheels?
It has got wheels. It's just like a normal aeroplane that has retractable undercarriage so that it lands on a normal airfield. It's programmed to do it. It's programmed to taxi where it needs to taxi, and it's operated with the crews. We are undergoing Australians who were involved on the crew who ferried it to Australia from the US in June. Those same people who are part of Number 9 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force, which has an amazing history. And it's undergoing taxi trials right now, and soon that aircraft will be operating from Tyndall in the Northern Territory. For now, we're going to operate it from Tyndall by people seated at Tyndall. Soon it'll be flown from Tyndall by people who are in Adelaide. Sorry, thank you.
John Hitchin,
Hello, John.
AUSI. Sir, on today's date, which country do you believe is leading in drone technology?
That's a really interesting. I think commercially, you would have to say China for the scale and their domination of what would be the commercial off-the-shelf drone technology. China is well advanced and is a market leader globally. That's slowly shifting as we see people responding to that, noting the challenges and opportunities I've talked about to some extent today. When it comes to different applications or different modalities of drone technology, such as the Triton that you see on the screens in front of you, then I would argue that the US and Western allies are very capable and if not world leading. When it comes to the way drones such as the MQ-28 and collaborative combat aircraft proceed, all I can say is we are well advanced, and Australia is a key part of that advancement, along with our key allies and partners who we work with closely. We may have what I would call transient advantage, but it will be a dynamic that shifts frequently. And I'm conscious of the microphone.
Ken Myers, Six Brucey. What powers the long distance drones, and are the long distance drones controlled by satellite?
So if you look at the one on the screen, that has a it's a turbine engine, which is pretty much what you would see on a business jet, that sort of aircraft, which both generates a lot of flight power, but also electrical power to operate the systems on the aircraft. So that's one end of the spectrum, and probably the most extreme end. The MQ-28 has a similar sort of engine in it, where you see it propelling the aircraft and providing electrical power and hydraulics and a few other things. But for many of the smaller systems, they are battery powered, so battery technology comes into play, and some of the loitering munitions and some of the one-way attack drones are powered by small, very cheap piston engines, small aircraft engines that you would be familiar with, but in a very, basically an upscaled model aeroplane engine. That sort of thing can be a player. Some of the systems that we are experimenting with have those small combustion engines that are basically the size of a whippersnipper engine, as one example, and they can fly for a long time if you put enough fuel on them. So we're seeing a range of power sources from turbines, advanced turbines, cheap and affordable small pistons. Battery power is the more common for the very short range, lower cost systems that you see in and around the place. And when you go to the national park and you're in a beautiful serene environment and you hear that buzzing sound of a drone, that's very likely powered by batteries of some description.
How do you control over 2,000 km by satellite?
Satellites have a part of the system, yeah. So there's a bunch of survivable and adjustable chains of communication with the system, as well as its own ability, if it loses a link, to operate in a fail-safe mode such that it will return to its pre-planned location if it loses link.
Thank you.
Thank you, good question. Now there's a gentleman here who's been very patient. Hello.
Hello, I'm Paul, and I was very interested in your answer about GhostBat.
Yeah.
Recently, Boeing lost out in being selected to proceed with the US Air Force collaborative combat aircraft. Yeah. They're completely re-evaluating.
Yeah.
And that, I think, has led to this suggestion that they're not prepared to further invest in GhostBat, and that we, as a result, will go ISR and not strike. But I also know that in the last month or so, the US Navy has sent personnel from VX4, their test squadron, to fly with our development program.
Right.
And a GhostBat is now in the United States with the US Navy, and I've seen one photograph of the MQ-25.
Yes.
And it's a candidate for their carry-based strike. You're not prepared to commit to this strike option. It's part of something else. Surely that's an opportunity to engage now with the US Navy to develop a strike capability for collaborative combat aircraft.
Thank you for the excellent observations, and all of the things you just touched on are largely true. We are working very closely with the US Navy as well, and as you would understand, we have a very deep relationship with both the US Air Force and the US Navy in an aviation sense. And of course our relationship with the US forces writ large is diverse and covers all domains. For MQ-28, there are technologies and systems that it brings and that Australia brings to the shared collaborative combat aircraft development cycles that are very useful for both the US Navy and to some extent the US Air Force and others who are involved in various AUKUS-style agreements. So we are exploring all of those options, and there is future investment in MQ-28 within limits, noting the other challenges, and of course it has to deliver and we can't fund it endlessly. But it has been a very positive way for us to bring something to that shared ecosystem that lets us be part of that greater shared ecosystem. So if the outcome is that, hey, and as I keep trying to allude to, it's less about the thing at the end of the system that achieves the effect and what effect that might be. It's more about a smart ecosystem that can control, coordinate, synchronise the effects that we would seek. So it's a bit of both. The vehicle is important, but the system is more important. So the vehicle and its capabilities matter, but it's not the definitive element for us. And once we build the system, we'll be able to adapt it quickly to a range of effects.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for addressing us today. I'm Patrick Matthews, and could you address the hypothesis that we hear more and more about, that the drones will be the end, or make carriers obsolete, aircraft carriers obsolete?
I'm just thinking to my friends and colleagues in the US Navy aviation community who would be looking and listening very carefully at what I say. I would say that it would be premature to predict the end of any capability, concept or system right now. The ability for the carrier systems to project power over great distance and sustain and project combat air power will, I think, be relevant for many years to come. And so while we will see adaptation in response to drone technology and some of the options and capabilities that presents, it's always a chicken and egg scenario where there is a technology that threatens your key systems and capabilities and you adapt quickly to counter those, and that cycle will continue as it has for many, many years. From my immediate perspective would be, don't write off anything and make vast assumptions, but be open to the rapid evolution of warfare in response to the technologies we see emerging through drones and other systems like that. So there is ongoing adaptation to happen. I think it's premature to signal the end of any particular capability, mindset or system that we see in use today. Thank you. I've got one over the back. Alan.
Alan Smith from RUSI. The question I had relates to battle space and airspace management, noting that the various capabilities and sizes and ranges of these UAVs and drones, how's that affecting your planning and cycles with inter-agency support, noting the different agencies that manage airspace and then subsequent battle space?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Thanks, Alan. And so there's a couple of dimensions to that. First of all, who we have to work with and what standards of compliance we have to meet to operate the systems we wish to operate in and around the airspace. And the Triton is probably the best example, where I've got that operating in just about every class of airspace in and around my air bases and up into transcontinental airspace and international airspace, albeit at significant altitude, but still a factor for air traffic. And so we're working very hard to work through that, noting the US has been operating MQ-4 and other similar aircraft in the environment for some time, and we are leveraging their efforts and support as always, that we're immensely grateful for. For the smaller systems, it gets a little trickier. Often We just need to provide a risk-managed framework around that, but we are working with Air Services and the Civil Aviation Safety Authority to be able to do that. And for airspace that I control, arguably in and around defence aerodromes, where I am my team operates as the authority for the air defence control of that airspace, then we have some latitude to apply our own regulatory frameworks, and our Defence Aviation Safety Authority is intrinsic in our ability to do that. Noting many of the civil operators are technically excluded from operating in and around our bases. Practically it's very hard to enforce, as I've touched on already. So there are a range of stakeholders, and for example at major events we would be working with the local police or the federal police at major events that occur where we take part. Air shows are no different, and so the stakeholder list is broad and growing, but it's one that we're well adjusted to.
Last question.
Last question of this gentleman here. Thank you.
Robert Crawford, Rosie. Is this the time to talk about loyal wingmen?
Yeah, Robert, so loyal wingman is largely, thank you for the question, loyal wingman is largely that collaborative combat aircraft in the MQ-28 Ghostbat. So that was one of the names the system has effectively used over its life cycle. So it really just is an example of systems where we see human-machine teaming, and that's what we're aiming to achieve and demonstrate and hopefully operationalise through systems like MQ-28 or similar as they continue to evolve. And as I said, the technology will evolve quickly, and we will see the Australian Defence Force as a small but capable technology-enabled force embrace things like the loyal wingman collaborative combat aircraft, MQ-28 being an example. Yes, and so you'll see us embrace that technology and bring it to bear as a way of generating mass and tempo as we need to across a vast area with a small force.
Thank you, Air Vice Marshal, for your presentation. Ecosystems is clearly a term that we'll need to add to our strategic lexicon going forward. But on behalf of RUSI New South Wales, can I say it has been an honour to have you with us today and to hear firsthand how UAVs and other advanced technologies are becoming an important part of the increasing capability and lethality of the Royal Australian Air Force. The recent use of exploding communication devices and the use of drones by Ukrainian forces against tank and warship alike, and no less so probably the development of Enigma to break the German codes in the Second World War, all remind us that embracing new technology is critical to survival. As our Special Interest Group on Strategy notes in its recent monthly report, AUKUS, the Australia-UK-US tripartite partnership, is essentially an agreement to jointly develop advanced military technology. Pillar 1, as we know, of that agreement relates to building a nuclear-powered attack submarine, but Pillar 2 relates to other advanced technologies. And indeed, on the 9th of September, it was reported from Washington that while the United States is satisfied with the progress of AUKUS Pillar 1, it is growing impatient with a lack of progress under Pillar 2's 8 priority research fields: advanced cyber, artificial intelligence, quantum technologies, undersea capabilities, hypersonic missiles, electronic warfare, innovation and information sharing, each of which has, as we've heard, has game-changing winning potential in the strategic competition with China. Now, since AUKUS was announced 3 years ago, China has extended its advantage in critical technologies, and the Biden administration is pushing for AUKUS partnership to launch 2 or 3 world-leading military technology projects under AUKUS Pillar 2 before President Biden's presidency ends next January. So, sir, your presentation today is very much a timely reminder of the critical importance of these new technologies, the need for our Air Force to embrace them, and for our government to fund them. Now, for over 136 years since it was established in 1888, RUSI New South Wales has sought to promote informed debate and to improve public awareness and understanding of defence and national security in the Australian community. So thank you indeed for your observations today, for your insights, and for contributing to RUSI New South Wales' efforts to promote the debate and inform the Australian public on these and other important defence and security issues. Can I also just take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank you for the tremendous support that you give us as one of our vice patrons, and for the interest that you've always shown in our activities, and we truly do appreciate that. Now, we usually offer our presenters, or give our presenters a 12-month membership of RUSI, but as an honorary, as a vice patron, you already have all the benefits that we could offer you in the 12-month membership. But I can still offer you a tie. We do have blue and red. I assume for Air Force blue was the appropriate colour. So please, on our behalf, thank you very much. And